Good morning, I'm Logan Lover, CATS PIO. This is Brian Horton, the project manager for Microtransit. He's going to give a presentation this morning, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll take Q&A. So if you have questions or comments during his presentation, please drop them in the chat.
Well, thanks, Logan. Today, we're going to go over microtransit implementation. And as Logan mentioned, there will be opportunity for questions at the end of the chat. So please enter those into the chat as you see the rise for a question. There it goes. All right, so microtransit actually falls into our Envision My Ride plan. And wanted to give some planning policy context for microtransit. Many folks are probably more familiar with the 2030 system plan of CATS, which guides a lot of the link system corridors, like in Metro Rapid Bus Corridor on 77, the commuter rail red line corridor, City Link streetcar corridors, and a lot of the links light rail corridors in Charlotte and Matthews. But the bus recommended better bus network is part of the Envision My Ride plan or bus priority plan. And microtransit was one of those three key strategies for that plan. Basically, that plan envisioned a high frequency route network and then microtransit zones filling out that service in between the high frequency routes, and then mobility hubs as kind of the connecting places between the routes and the zones. And that policy plan, or Envision My Ride Better Bus Network, was adopted by our Metropolitan Transit Commission last year and really rethought our bus system, including microtransit as a key strategy for on-demand solutions, especially first last mile connections to our light rail and bus routes. And really, this is rethinking transit holistically, really rethinking transit in terms of a new vision, moving away from our older hub and spoke model to a more high frequency crosstown network, and ultimately these hubs that can provide connectivity between that network and the first mile, last mile system of microtransit. And during this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot more about microtransit, but essentially it's a new strategy that really leverages technology and is customer focused. Because really we're rethinking transportation and public transportation or transit as mobility. Is your access to opportunity, is your access to quality of life, livability solutions for a modern world in which we leverage technology and integrate a variety of forms of transportation better into a variety of place types and communities. Microtransit is part of that strategy. It really is, if you think about it, a new, a reinvented version of an old technology. Demand response transit has been around for years. And ultimately, that transit system is rethinking microtransit as kind of that first mile, last mile service. Micro is really just a term meaning smaller vehicles. As you see pictured here, it can be a variety of vehicles. It can be taxis, vans, motor pools, and Lyft, Uber, transportation network companies, and a variety of those types of vehicles integrated through a smartphone application. CATS already has a Go Pass app, CATS Pass Go app, that is launched and provides today access to our trip planning, our fares, passes, where you can find where the bus is, where the train is, real-time data. This same app is anticipated to soon expand to provide a booking tool that will allow our customers to directly look for the first mile, last mile services that can connect them as well and book that service through the app. And many places have already done this. Microtransit is nothing new to North Carolina or the US. Wilson, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh, was one of the first communities to completely convert their existing transit service over to microtransit. They branded that service as Ride and use a dedicated fleet of vans that are branded to provide that service. In the map you see, the blue zone is a geofenced area that in the app, you're allowed to use that service to go anywhere, kind of curb to curb or between virtual stops. Then the blue dots are popular stops where there's higher demand, where there's a little bit more infrastructure and organized service in terms of the loading zones and where that stop is located. And so how this works is basically you have the opportunity with a smartphone to locate where you're going in that zone and travel anywhere within the blue boundary. But within the blue dots, you also have a stop that can be used really just on demand. Wilmington has also launched a microtransit service, and they brand that service Micro. And also you have our branded van fleet to do that, but they used it instead of transit services Wilson did. Wilmington used this to expand their service. They kept, as you see the map on the right, a core system of rainbow color routes and the small black dots that are their bus stops. They kept that as their core system, but all these new 4 zones, and you see that on the left, the 4 green areas, have, as you see in the map on the right, both the blue dots that are kind of the virtual stops that'd be equivalent of the blue blobs you saw on the Wilson map, as well as the orange dots that are more the hubs or flex stops on demand that you saw as blue dots on the Wilson map. But this is not just being done in North Carolina. This is being done across the country, including Dallas, Texas, which is a good model for CATS because they actually have a similar app already launched, similar to ours, that they call their Go app, and they branded their microtransit service as Go Link. Dallas is also a good model because, of course, it's an integrated service with not just light rail, but also bus routes and even more zones than actually Charlotte has adopted initially for our plan. They have about 30 plus zones in Dallas where we're in our plan looking at around just under 20 initial zones. So again, I mentioned hubs as a key aspect of how microtransit can work because that is the interface or the connection transfer point often between microtransit zones and the greater transit system, the high frequency routes, bus routes, and rail routes or rail lines. So what is really a hub? A hub is a variety of types of kind of super stops, if you will, bus stops, but it can also be, of course, a lot of your stations and your park and rides. But ultimately, any mobility hub really is a great customer interface of integrated multimodal transportation options, not just transit, but you have micromobility such as bicycles, scooter, pedestrian access. You can have parking access, curb space for your microtransit, loading areas. It really provides all forms of access and mobility. And it's not just stations or park and rides, but super stops. And here's an example of a park and ride in the Huntersville community that can function much more than just cars and buses, as shown in the trail connection that's planned. And I think this actually is going to groundbreaking soon, is the Torrance Greenway that's connecting the Rosedale community in Huntersville that will provide greater pedestrian access and bicycle access to the park and ride, such that not everyone has to get in a car to get to transit, and have micromobility access as well. So when we think of these hubs as beyond just the park and rides and stations, what is really the components, or what's missing from a lot of our bus stops to really transform them into multimodal hubs or connection points between microtransit and bus routes? So these are examples in the community of Davidson, the town of Davidson, where there's not currently a CATS park and ride that's CATS owned. It's just there's some on-street and off-street parking opportunities that function as park and rides, but the bus stops really have a lot of the multimodal aspects that can work as a hub and don't need too much more to be included as a microtransit hub or a microtransit stop. And often in a lot of these examples, there is parking nearby, be it on street or off street. There's sometimes seating already in terms of either at the bus stop formally or sometimes in adjoining streetscape improvements. And there's often bicycle parking also sometimes nearby. So a lot of multimodal components and place types where microtransit hubs can already work with the existing built environment. So how do we get there? You've heard how microtransit is part of an overall strategy to really re-envision our bus system in terms, or really overall transit as a better mobility service that's more convenient to our customers. And that's the idea, to basically empower customers to have convenient access to transit, especially if transit where it cannot be a high frequency rail line or high frequency bus route, really then that frequency becomes the convenience of scheduling a service, booking a ride whenever you need it to go wherever you want to go within the microtransit zones. So it's more on-demand convenience. But how do we get there in terms of implementing that vision? Well, first, I want to kind of give some background of how CATS operates today in the North Mecklenburg towns of Davidson, Cornelius, and Huntersville, because this is one of our initial pilots as a microtransit zone project. And today we have both express corridor services on I-77 corridor that take advantage of the express lanes and our existing parking rides that exist at every exit off of I-77 in the North Towns to provide a direct ride into Charlotte. That is a commuter-focused service. That is your spine that long-term we see adding more trips, more all-day service to provide that regional, more high-frequency corridor long-term. The local service today is provided by the Village Riders, which are actually a hybrid flex route that does go on the route every trip and serves bus stops, but can also go, as you see in the light green zone shaded area, it can deviate to 3/4 of a mile off route by request. But that request today has to be done at least a day in advance, and it has to be a place that's checked whether a bus can go down that and serve that location or not. So there are limitations for that flexibility or that deviation. With microtransit, that the deviations can be anywhere within the zone once the service is fully launched in terms of a dedicated provider, because a dedicated provider can have smaller fleet like vans that can access more locations. And it can also be done through the app, which is same day or even same hour requests to get that pickup and drop off when you need it, not having to do it at least a day in advance. The fares today on the Village Rider are only 90 cents if you stay, or if you only travel one way on a Village Rider or stay on the Village Rider. But now if you transfer though to the express routes, you have to pay the difference in fare. But going from one Village Rider to another in traveling the same direction is free. So you heard a little bit about what operates today, and this is why we think the Village Riders is a good candidate area for a microtransit pilot, because the local service today is very limited. You can't get same day requests for deviation. It's only hourly service on the routes today. That doesn't really have good frequency that really empowers the customer to travel whenever they want to go. So microtransit is a great test here because it will provide more effective frequency in terms of that convenience of booking travel on an app, as well as the going anywhere within the zone in terms of similar to the Village Riders providing deviation. So again, the service strategy here is really, can we take a low ridership area and a low frequency area and really beef up ridership and service that's more convenient for the customer? And that service can ultimately provide more curb-to-curb direct service, staying within the zones, as well as first last mile connectivity to the parking rides for when people want to travel beyond the zones or like to go into Charlotte and to travel longer distances. So we anticipate our point-to-point launch project, and I'm going to go through this of what our initial pilot will be by actually this spring, summer in 2023. But a full zones launch of getting a dedicated provider with vans that can go anywhere within the zones, we do anticipate that not occurring until 2024 because of some contracting still to work out to get that dedicated provider. And we've been doing extensive initial public outreach. Of course, these are formal meetings to launch this initiative, but we are looking, and you'll hear later, about other community engagement opportunities. Of course, we'll be riding along on our Village Riders, having pop-up events at our parking rides for express riders, but really want to seek out other community events where we can reach a broader audience. But thus far, we've had official virtual public meetings like this. This is the last of 3 to kick it off. We have also had public meetings in each of the towns, and we'll have one more tomorrow evening, 6 to 8 p.m. in Cornelius. But again, this is just the launch of the public involvement. We do very much expect to have pop-up events and go to other community organizations to try to reach a lot more people. So again, what is the project schedule for this pilot and the overall microtransit initiative? So right now we are in app development and outreach. We are finalizing the procurement of a booking app tool that will be added to the CATS Pass app and we expect that to be launched this spring or by early summer. And that pilot launch will enable our customers to go on the Cats Pass app, which is a free download from any Play Store or the Apple Store, to add it to a smartphone. You can then use that app to schedule a ride on Lyft. Will be our primary provider during this app launch. Ultimately, though, we are looking at an expanded launch by 2024 that will have a dedicated fleet provider with vans, and that would be to go anywhere within the zone. So while the pilot is anticipated to launch very soon, spring or summer this year, that will be somewhat limited, somewhat constrained in terms of initial pilot launch. And that's because with using Lyft initially as our primary service provider, we are looking for locations within the north towns that are duly accessible or kind of equally accessible by both the Village Rider bus and Lyft vehicles. And here are 3 examples in each in Cornelius is on the left, Huntersville is in the middle, and Davidson's on the right. Each of those examples, and we're looking and locating many more, will have a place for the Village Rider to still serve the bus stop, but also for customers to use Lyft to pick them up from adjoining parking, be it on-street parking or off-street parking that's very close to the bus stop, to also have on-demand travel point to point during this pilot phase. So where are we in terms of implementation? We have hubs already in these towns that are existing park and rides. We are looking, though, what other possible destinations really need to serve as a hub. There are libraries, there are recreation and senior centers. So we're working very much to the community involvement to kind of identify those major destinations to see what needs to be set up as a point that can be served point to point during this pilot and ultimately incorporate it into the full launch and when the full zones have dedicated providers. But again, once we do have dedicated providers, the good news is those can serve a lot more virtual stops. You don't have to use a bus stop anymore once it's fully launched, because now you have the ability of using a smaller fleet to get you closer to your destination and not use a bus stop that may be on a thoroughfare or maybe not be comfortable for a pedestrian to access. And so when we're going through this process, we'll be looking at those zone boundaries as well. I should note the map you saw, that was the adopted map in the Envision My Ride plan, but was intentionally very squishy, fuzzy with those boundaries, because those boundaries are very much going to be refined through this process, looking to see what other destinations need to be served, and also through community input, where should the boundaries really be. But this will also help us with our bus stops. There are many bus stops in these communities. They're not very nice bus stops, to be frank, often lacking some shelter or amenities, or they're located on a higher speed, busier road that's not very often, sometimes not comfortable for pedestrians. So this is an opportunity to improve that service and look at other locations where microtransit can better serve, closer to grocery stores, closer to where people want to be. And so we're going to also be looking at the fare. What should the fare be with this service? Village Riders today is only 90 cents a ride, although when you transfer to Express, you have to pay the difference of over $2 to continue on. But initially, this pilot, at least when it's limited point to point, we anticipate being a free service during that pilot phase. And that pilot, again, is anticipated to launch spring or summer this year and last at least about 6 months for the pilot. That phase would be free. But when we expand to the full zone and have dedicated fleet, like accessible vans to provide the service, we are looking at what that fare should be. And that fare in many places where they have microtransit is often equal to maybe a little more than a bus fare, because it is seen somewhat as a premium service, a better service or more convenient service that provides better direct access to places. But it's not a fare that is at the same level as a Lyft or Uber ride if you had booked it yourself through those apps. It's less than that because the benefit is using this service in a way that can also provide connectivity to CATS buses and trains, so that there's advantage in having a reduced fare or subsidized Lyft Uber ride that's cheaper than what a customer would pay doing the same thing on a Lyft Uber app. And ultimately, this investment or the strategy allows us to take some of the hours that we have now that are very inefficient and on our lower frequency, low ridership routes, and reinvest them into our higher frequency core system. So for example, in these north towns, we have opportunity as we look at the long-term service plan that we could reinvest a lot of these hours or beef up service on 77 to make that more of an all day, every day, even weekends corridor in terms of a long-term service plan. And so we'll be looking at that. And ultimately, we'll be looking how to best market this service. How do we get, how do we message this service in ways that people can better understand what it is, how to use it, and where they can go using the service. So we'll be definitely out in the community throughout the pilot and kind of refining that message. And ultimately, this is going to inform us on terms of what is our overall strategy. We're doing the North Towns first as our pilot because it really helps us with the overall strategy across all of Mecklenburg, where we have just under 20 zones identified or adopted in the Envision My Ride plan. And going through that process, we will be looking at ultimately how do we restructure the overall CAT system in a way that we have quality bus routes, but also microtransit zones that really connect people in places where bus today is not working or where bus maybe never been introduced or it's been difficult to have bus service expanded. So microtransit provides a great tool to better expand transit more effectively. And so when we go through this process with the towns, we definitely want to make sure we have community input across all 3 towns. And so we're reaching out to various community organizations, the area chamber, area schools, rec centers, libraries, and we're getting the various perspectives, both from our existing customers, both local and express, our Village Rider, as well as potential new customers, because microtransit is ultimately designed to grow ridership. And in fact, in that Wilson example, you saw one of the oldest microtransit projects in North Carolina. They have more than tripled their ridership since their 2020 launch with their microtransit service. Of course, we're going to target our messaging to various audiences, including seniors. And that includes, of course, training how to use the smartphone app, as well as the digital divide in terms of those that don't have smartphones, how to use our call center to book a ride or go online to book a ride. So we'll be having various community involvement strategies with different audiences and focus groups. And that includes, like I mentioned earlier, having pop-ups at our park rides and riding along to reach our existing customers. But we want to also piggyback or join a lot of our communities at their events, going to, say, the Arts Center, or going to Addie Jenkins Center in the community so we can reach more of the community. So again, this is just the official public launch of our public meetings, but we're looking at all those opportunities to be present in the community and really engage the community. But we do have, this is the last of the virtual meetings, but we do have one last official public meeting. That's the kickoff, where it's a CATS meeting, and that's set up as an open house from 6 to 8 p.m. tomorrow evening at the Cornelius Town Hall. As an open house format, there will be a presentation, maybe like 6:15 p.m., but there'll be opportunity afterwards for questions and kind of a mapping engagement exercise for attendees to help tell us where in Cornelius or the surrounding, greater North Mecklenburg areas do people want to travel to, and how might they use microtransit. As this is not the only way to get involved. Obviously, we'll have additional pop-up events and shared events with the communities, but we do have an email set up for this project at catsmicrotransit@publicinput.com. So please contact us with any comments there. Of course, we have questions and answers here just a bit via chat on this virtual meeting. But if you didn't think of something in the chat, you can also still reach us at this project email. And we have a project survey set up, and the link is publicinput.com/catsmicrotransit, one word, that you can please take that survey. We're trying to see how what people think of microtransit and some questions about how they might use it. And this will also be shared out on the web as part of, once we get past this initial public launch, to have a landing page about microtransit. So I think that's all I have right now, but hopefully, Logan, there's been some questions entered into chat.
Yeah, we have several questions in the chat, and while Brian is answering these questions, if you think of another question or comment, please go ahead and drop it in the chat, so you can address that during the meeting. I also put that, excuse me, I put the survey link and that public input email address in the chat if you have questions or comments after the fact that you would like to send to the project team, and please provide your feedback via that survey. Our first question, Brian, is when is this coming to other areas of Charlotte?
Yes, so the initial pilots, besides the North towns, we have also the University area, North End area, like includes Camp North End, Double Oaks Community, Bright Walk, and North Carolina Music Factory. Those are other pilots that we anticipate launching by July of 2024. But as you saw in the Envision My Ride plan map, there are just under 20 total areas identified all across Mecklenburg County. So we are hopeful these pilots in both the North Towns and along Link's Blue Line will inform those remaining balance of the just under 20 zones, so we could launch those by 2025 or possibly late 2024.
All right, next question. Can we pay in cash like we would a bus fare?
So the pilot that will use Lyft and you book on the app doesn't, of course, it's free, the initial promotional pilot, but with Lyft, you do not pay. The Lyft driver would have your name, just your first name, and you would have their name and their vehicle description. And that's how you complete your trip, is that you don't have to exchange any cash or fare on the ride. Now, when this goes to full launch, there may be a mechanism then to pay via the app. And for those that are unbanked, we are looking at terms of not just microtransit, but our overall system, what solutions there are in terms of like our fare boxes and other things for folks to not have to pay cash eventually.
Okay, thank you. When is this going to start?
So the pilot starts spring, summer in the North Towns. More likely summer, fall for the Link's Blue Line, 2 areas North End University, and then a fuller launch for those areas in 2024, either likely winter, spring of 2024, and then the fuller all 20 zones, that was what was late 2024 to 2025 anticipated once we go beyond these 4 pilot areas.
How is the booking done? Is it online or can people simply call a number?
Yes, it's done either through the app, which is Cat's Pass app, which is a free download through Apple or Play Store if you have a Droid, or you can use 704-336-RIDE or 704-336-7443 as our call center, customer call center. You can call that number and you can book your travel that way if you lack a smartphone. Online, we haven't yet. There might be a web address to do so, but that address hasn't been determined yet. But there will be other options besides just using a smartphone to book travel.
What are the most common complaints from customers in a similar area to North Mech?
Sure. So today's complaints are that the service doesn't run earlier or later than what it does today, right? And that it's not very frequent. It only runs hourly, and that the deviations, either you have to call more than a day in advance, and sometimes they get denied if it's a private property, it's not a public street. The street is difficult for a bus to access, because a bus has to do it today with the Village Rider service. And those are complaints that microtransit seems to all be a better fit for, that it can have extended hours, being that the provider like Lyft is in the market in the area all the time, that the request can be made same day or even same hour, actually, instead of having to do that the day before. and that of course, smaller fleet can go a lot more places onto private properties or into smaller streets that a bus can't do.
Okay, are there any more public meetings in person?
The last that's scheduled right now is tomorrow evening, 6 to 8. But however, we do anticipate, like I said, doing pop-up events at our park and rides. If the best way to know about that is we have riders alerts that you can sign up for. And if you're signed up for that, you'll be alerted. Or of course, our social media will blast anything that we're doing in the community. And we often get those shares through our community partners. Either the towns or whatever community organization we're working with, like say a library, we would definitely cross promote any of those events.
Where is that meeting tomorrow night, Brian?
It's at the Cornelius Town Hall, which is on Catawba Avenue in downtown Cornelius, just off of Old Statesville Road, or 115, I should say, highway in downtown Cornelius.
Okay, I put that information in the chat. Next question. Do you have any recommendations for how I can promote this program on campus here at Davidson College?
Yes. So 2 ways. For one, you can invite us to any pop-up events there on campus to have in-person outreach, but of course, help us cross-promote. We'd love to have like maybe a student focus group or even staff too, to kind of just get a good representation of questions and concerns about the project and how we can better hone that message, refine that message for that audience. And so please reach us out to us at that project email too, to help set that up.
Yeah, I'll put that project email one more time in the chat if you want to reach out to that Key Turk, and we'll be able to connect staff with you. Next question. Will this program connect to Amtrak stations like the one in Charlotte or Kannapolis?
Yes, so the Amtrak station is actually in the North End zone, which is a pilot zone of the existing Amtrak station. I think some may be aware there's the plans to relocate the Amtrak station to Charlotte Gateway Station in Uptown Charlotte. But the existing Amtrak station is within the North End zone. That is one of our pilots that is anticipated more summer, fall of this year. So not too far behind the North Towns as a pilot zone. And that would connect you between the 25th Street and Parkwood Lynx Blue Line stations to the Amtrak station to have that CATS connectivity.
All right, right now we have 2 more questions. So if you have any additional questions or comments, please go ahead and put them in the chat now. Next question, how many people will fit in the cars, and will the cars go directly to the stop chosen, or will they pick up others on the way?
Right, so that is a key distinction between microtransit and say transportation network companies ride sharing. So it is ride sharing. By using this service, you don't have necessarily your own ride, although with the Lyft pilot, it will likely be just your party using that service, and that is limited to 3 individuals for Lyft's, typically for a Lyft vehicle to pick you up. But once it's a dedicated provider, it is a van, and so it may have greater capacity, say up to 5 individuals, and that vehicle will be a shared ride. Now, the app or the program basically uses algorithms to efficiently schedule dynamically that pickup and drop off. So there'll be times where often you're the only request on that ride, but it will try to combine nearby requests that are efficient to do so, to still make sure that you arrive or depart on the times that you request in the app. So, or by calling call center, those requested times of departure and arrival are what's honored, but then you may have someone joining you on that trip if it can be efficiently done that way.
Okay, and this is the last question we have in the chat right now. What are the most common complaints from customers using the microtransit system?
Okay, so we don't have one currently in place in Charlotte, but we've been asking around to other places what the complaints are. And a lot of what we're hearing is it was the initial launch, there was the fear just not knowing what this was, and if changing, especially for existing customers, existing bus riders, or in our case, Be Village riders, they just not knowing how the service was going to work. But we've also heard from those places where they have effectively replaced or implemented their microtransit that this is now more popular than a lot of their shuttle routes or circulator routes that were how they, traditionally done first mile, last mile service. In other words, there's entire communities now that actually want microtransit instead of a small bus or traditional shuttle circulator type service. That kind of transitioning from not knowing what was to, hey, this works really well, or we really like this and we wish we could have this more places.
Thank you. That's the last question right now. We'll give you all a few more minutes to see if you have any questions or comments. And again, I'm going to put the public input email in there where you can reach out and connect with Microtransit staff, and also the link survey, please, or the survey link, I'm sorry, please take that survey.
And here are those again. I know you dropped it in the chat. Thanks, Logan, but here are those email and survey links also for everybody.
Okay, we got another question, Brian. Who do we contact to schedule a meeting for our organization?
Sure, that project email right there, catsmicrotransit@publicinput.com. And we'll reach back out to confirm how we can attend and present or be part of your agenda.
Okay, we have gotten another question. Are you outsourcing the development of the CATS Pass app?
So our CATS Pass app as it exists was a procurement that was open for various software platforms, and that was had its own open procurement process that led to what was the developer chosen for our CATS Pass app, which happens to be Unwire. And then now we are going through the process of amending that for a sub vendor that will be the booking tool, and that's a sub vendor that's Spare. All that was done through kind of a procurement process that then, yes, those are contracted software provider vendors. And then the microtransit itself can be done through both the software as a service platform in terms of a booking tool, as well as mobility as a service providers, which would be then also through an open procurement process where various operators of microtransit, and there's so many, I don't even want to list individuals because there's so many that can apply to be that provider. And that procurement process is anticipated this year to help us do the full launch by 2024.
Thank you. Last call for questions. We'll give you another minute or two for you to get any last questions and comments in the chat.
And here's that address for the town hall meeting tomorrow night. If you can attend, but again, it's not required to attend the in-person public meeting. That's the last that's currently scheduled. Town halls at 21445 Catawba Avenue, which is very close to the intersection of NC Highway 115 in downtown Cornelius. Near
also,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Brian. I was going to say these virtual meetings are also recorded and they're on the CATS YouTube page. If you want to watch those, see what other questions were asked, or share these videos with someone else, you can do that on CATS YouTube page.
That's right. Thanks.
I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thank you all for joining today, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.